the hold-up is around two really key points. One is restrictions that the IRB wish to place on Australian media companies around our rights under the Copyright Act of Australia, where we are allowed to run match footage under a thing called fair dealing. The second thing is that the IRB is insisting that should we run any of this footage, that we are not allowed to place ads before and after that footage. Now that's a basic business model approach of our websites, whether it is Fairfax or News Limited, and therefore we don't believe that the IRB is in a position to start telling us how we should run our businesses, and we don't actually believe that they're in a position to start telling us about how we should cover an event. We got very close to an agreement, but we simply cannot get over these 2 points where the IRB wants to limit us to a certain amount of video footage. They want to make sure that we pull that footage down after 48 hours, even if there is no good reason to do so. And they want us to geo-block, which means restrict people from outside Australia, or even for our New Zealand colleagues, New Zealand, from seeing our video coverage of the tournament. And we're just not signing those conditions. And we feel that we can provide a better coverage of the Rugby World Cup without their media accreditation, without their restrictions. And that is what we're going to do.
Now, Australia and New Zealand have gone separate ways on this. Fairfax is a good example because here in Australia, Fairfax hasn't signed anything, whereas Fairfax in New Zealand, which publishes the Dominion Post and stuff.co.nz, is planning to go along and cover the competition as usual. Why the divergence?
Well, they're not going to cover it in the usual way, in the sense that our New Zealand colleagues have had some very serious negotiations with the IRB themselves. The key issue around this in terms of the Australian stance and the New Zealand stance is in fact the laws of each of the countries. And each of the countries, while supporting a concept of fair dealing which allows all media to use highlights of matches, you know, winning try or whatever, the New Zealanders have a slightly less free law in this regard, and so because of that slight difference, it actually does allow them to go into the grounds and report the games without actually compromising what the Australian companies would see as compromising their local legislation.
Now, the other big player in all of this is, of course, the Australian Associated Press. Now, the AAP signed the deal with the IRB just a couple of days ago, but they weren't too happy about it, were they? Why were they reluctant to sign the deal, and why did they do so anyway?
They're unhappy with it because they can't provide a full service for their clients. They are not able to produce video reportage from even outside the ground of a match for the Rugby World Cup. These kind of restrictions have meant that AAP have basically given up arguing on this point, because we all know that it is important, particularly for regional Australian newspapers, to receive AAP copy. And so they are going, but they are going with a good deal of regret in terms of having to really provide a stripped down service because of the restrictions of the IRB.
The IRB has released a statement to the effect that this isn't about a free press and it's not about fair dealing. They've framed this as a purely commercial disagreement. What's really at stake here?
It's certainly a commercial issue as far as the IRB is concerned, because everything with the IRB is a commercial issue. It is a freedom of the press issue. A free press is a free press. We've had Senate inquiries in Australia that essentially state that it doesn't matter whether you're in print or on a mobile computing platform, the beliefs and values of a free press remain. Well, while you cannot take video outside the ground of a rugby match for fear of losing accreditation, well, that's not a free press. I mean, you should really be able to do it with inside the ground too. I'm not advocating that anybody should broadcast commentary or full match footage or anything like that, because we all understand that there is a value there and there are rights holders, etc. But for the IRB to say this is not a free press issue is fundamentally misunderstanding or misrepresenting where we're coming from.
And where does all of this leave us? What does this mean for the future, not just of sports accreditation, but of sports reporting?
Certainly, some of the value of the accreditation is access to the players and the media conference. However, I think that we are seeing increasingly in our society that our readers, our audiences are more interested in what individuals are saying, what fans are saying, than frankly some of the more cliche turns of phrase that you get from taciturn managers who have lost and those who have won. And frankly, that gets less and less interesting the more and more you see of it. However, fans are fascinated by the views of other fans. And so really as journalists, we need to understand that Facebook and Twitter, these are all mainstream media now, and we need to be able to understand how to leverage it and how to champion it in a sense so that our own audiences get the benefit out of it. It's got to be said that from covering any sports event, when it's here's the media accreditation, here's your access to the media conference after the match, and so forth, and here's the cup of tea at the back of the press box. To be honest with you, that's really old school stuff. And so if we really want to modernise the relationship between sports administrators and newspapers, we've really got to look at these different media platforms and how they are used. And if sports' idea is to simply try and cut the salami thinner of every time we try and cover the sport or the event, if they try to continually restrict us, then we will not sign their documents and we will cover it in another way.